Hey, welcome to the Growth Whisperers podcast, where everything we talk about is related to helping leaders and their teams build enduring great businesses. I'm Kevin Lawrence, and I'm joined here by my co-host, Brad Giles. Brad, how you doing today?
Pretty good. How you doing today, Kevin?
You know, I'm doing really well. We're kind of getting the hang of this thing, and actually I'm really looking forward to what we're talking about today. What do we got on the slate here today, Brad?
Yeah, today we've got a couple of interesting subjects. The first one is some really different pivot examples. We've seen pivot examples that we kind of know about, breweries going from brewing beer to hand sanitizer, but we've got a couple of interesting ones there. And also we're talking about a really important leadership team principle that you and I work with and we know is very, very important, called disagree and commit.
Yeah, and that one's not easy for everyone. That's something that's almost counterintuitive to some people. And it's about when do you call the question and get people to finally agree to proceed? And then how do you get them to do that, which is the magic, which we'll get into today.
Yeah. So first of all, there's a cinema pivot example. In fact, a couple. So we know about this pivoting issue that everyone's doing. And I've been doing a lot of with clients, and I know you have too. But I've used as a case study many times. It's all good and well to pivot this company, but imagine if you were a cinema, because cinemas fill up with people and then they watch the screen. That just goes against everything to do with social distancing and everything that what can you do in that situation? So I've been using that as a case study, but we've got a couple of examples that have come out of, I think, the States and maybe Canada about a different way to think about it. And it's just some really good creative thinking.
It is, and it's fascinating because sometimes this creative thinking is so basic. Like the one the one in Texas, where they went back and said, hey, we'll put up a big screen outside the theater, which we call a theater, you call it a cinema. We'll put up a big screen and you come park your cars in the parking lot. Well, you know, we call those drive-in theaters. They used to be huge in North America. There's actually still one, probably 15 minutes from where I am here in Canada. There's still one that operates.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's they just took a step back in time. It's so simple. Although from what you were saying, we were talking before, but you were saying that they weren't charging for the movie. Is that right?
Yeah. So you can drive your car. If you're in your car, you're still socially isolated. I guess it depends on which state or country you're in, but it's working for them. You can drive up, free to get into the movie, free to drive into the car park. You watch the big screen, you watch the screen. I guess you tune in via the radio in your car, but then you have to pay for the food. The food must be, I don't know, where they're getting more margin or they're attracting people because of the free. Yeah, so you pay for the food, you get the movie for free. It's a great principle.
And that's sort of like what their business model has been in the past, because from what I understand in the cinema business, most of the ticket revenue actually goes to the film producers or to the film companies, not just the producers. And they make their money on the concession. Hence why the prices are what they are.
Yeah.
And so they're just sort of, and I mean, they must have brokered some sort of a deal with the movie companies to not have that revenue flowing. But it's amazing because it's not a rocket science invention. Like, they didn't reinvent the wheel. I think it's smart. And even if it doesn't make the kind of money they used to make, it doesn't replace their business model. Yeah, I find it smart. Like, I like it because you're keeping your customers engaged.
Absolutely.
And even if it's a break-even proposition, a break-even customer service at even the food sales covering their costs, their operating costs that night.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to do for your community and help to build loyalty. And heck, people need, where they're allowed to, people need to get out of the house. I just love that idea.
If there was one near you or I, you would probably go.
Yes.
They've got an empty car park that's doing nothing. They've got an empty building. Yes. They've got an empty kitchen. It's just a great example. Some of the examples were pretty obvious, but I just love that one. I love that one because of that. And sorry?
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
I was going to say, then we've got another example of a cinema complex who are creating revenues as well. Cinema's such a hard case study. And do you want to tell us about that one?
Yeah, as we were talking about this before the show, we were brainstorming with my son Braden, and he said he had heard that Cineplex was renting the movies. So basically, Cineplex is a chain of theaters here in North America, and what they were doing, and we went to the site and checked it out. You can go and rent, and I pulled up one here. I think it was called Into the Wild. Yeah, the call of the Wild, and I can rent it for $5 or buy it for $21.99.
Yeah.
So it's very much like a pay-per-use model, like iTunes would
or
offer.
Apple TV.
Exactly. So they've kind of, and I was curious if they had a link to iTunes or something as a backend, but they have their own backend that you log into. Now, whether this was in their plans or not, again, people love movies. It's an escape, and right now people probably need some extra escape.
Yeah.
And so it's another pivot. Now, is it profitable? Is it going to turn into anything? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of all these, it doesn't matter. Trying something and seeing what works and how the customer responds, because if we look forward next couple years, are you going to be going to a movie theater real soon and getting shoulder to shoulder with strangers?
Probably not.
No.
Probably not.
But I really like movies, and I enjoy Netflix and other things. But if the old school stream for the movie business, i.e. theaters, needs to or wants to stay alive, this might be a pivot that takes them somewhere or gives them some more information. So again, they're doing it. Congrats to them. And if it works, they might continue down the path. And if it doesn't, well, they've tried and they learned what not to do. But I think they're both really good and very different ideas.
I think what's interesting is you and I both play in this space with leadership teams, and we were both really surprised when we heard about these two examples, knowing how hard it would be if we had a cinema as a customer or a chain of cinemas as a customer. It'd be like, that'd be a really hard one to do. And then we were so surprised. And then I guess it triggered us to think, well, you know what? Like, we can be more creative than we first thought. You've just got to get right back to foundational basics of, well, what is it that we do? And I know so many people are trying to do that all over the world at the moment.
Yes.
But if it can still surprise us, it means there's still work, there's good work to be done to pivot business models.
There is. And it's almost like startup creativity. Yeah. Like and a challenge what happens is a lot of people get trapped in their existing plans and their existing infrastructure and policies and the long-term strategic plan, which, a lot of that stuff normally is great and valuable.
Yeah.
But you gotta be able to cut some of that loose to innovate. And that's why a lot of companies, as they get more successful, have a hard time innovating. We see it all the time. So I would love to be inside these companies to figure out how they did it.
Yeah.
And no matter what, for us, even like for us in our as advisors and for our clients, just the credit goes to those that are in the game and that are trying stuff and getting their people to try something different and keeping that entrepreneurial spirit alive. So I give these guys lots of credit.
Yeah. It's a great inspiration, if nothing else, for many people to continue to be creative. So on to the second, and probably I think that what we've agreed is something that we're going to talk a little bit longer about compared to the pivot example. Something that every single time I run a workshop, for 10 years, I start with this one slide, and it includes this phrase, which is disagree and commit. And I know that you're probably similar because it's such a fundamental part of what we do in getting alignment in leadership teams. So, so what is disagree and commit in your mind, Kev?
Well, it's the antidote to a drive for consensus.
Yeah.
Because some people think in order to operate well as a team, we need to have complete consensus. Well, the only way you'll generally get consensus on important stuff is if you slip into the mediocre middle, right? No one's ever going to agree to take a risk in this direction or try something new because it's not safe. So you'll end up with a very safe, conservative, and slow organization.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to, it's the antidote to that. And really what it is, and, my first experience to this, and I want to give credit. My first, I think it's my first, or my second real client more than 25 years ago. My first clients, it was his parents' accounting firm. And they became my second client. And the lady there, I remember, and she was a passionate lady and she loved to debate. Her name was Judy Majewski. Hey, Judy, I hope you're doing well if you get to hear this. And what Judy used to say, she said, Kevin, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. And that's the advantage. And I use it all the time. So my version is agree to disagree. And I use it all the time. And she was, because we were in a debate and it was like, she wasn't going to back down. And I believed I was right, which, may not be true, but this agree to disagree, it's like, it's putting, it's Paul and disagree and commit, it's the same thing. It's like, we need to move ahead. Nobody's going to die here, but we need to know that we're, after this decision, on the other side of the doorway, we're still arm in arm, hand in hand, metaphorically, obviously even more metaphorically today, that we are still working towards that same outcome and on the same team, even though, and we've said our piece. So, it's a mechanism to get us to move ahead and basically create a bit of a compromise and not retrace our steps.
I heard Pat Lencioni. I mean, so many of the great thinkers use some kind of phrase like this. Pat Lencioni, Jim Collins, there's some great work because it's so important. I heard Pat Lencioni talking about the difference between disagree and commit and agree to disagree. And it was really interesting. He said, when we agree to disagree, we go 6 weeks into the quarter and then you say, oh, I told you it wouldn't work. I told you it wasn't going to work because that was my opinion. So he said, and this is his opinion, which I find interesting. Let's just leave it at that. He said that instead of, when someone says, let's agree to disagree, that's when you take the boxing gloves off. That's when, okay, now we've really got to get to a debate and keep pushing until we get to a place where one person says, 5 of the people on the leadership team, they're all saying, let's go north. And I'm the one that's saying south. I'm going to disagree and commit in the interests of the health of the team. Because if that person says, okay, I'm going to agree to disagree with you, and I maintain my disagreement with the other person, right, we're going to get 5 weeks into the quarter. I told you it didn't work. So there's always that undermining problem.
Right. And it is, and I think you can spin the language any way you want.
Yeah.
The truth is there needs to be an energetic commitment,
yes,
not a false commitment. So I could take that one phrase and say, well, no, that's why it needs to be agree to disagree. You could argue, whatever. The concept is we need to wholeheartedly agree, and it needs to be a one-way road. And you can tell in a debate, and we'll get into that probably a bit, but there's a certain point where people are just like, okay. They're not doing it out of anger or out of frustration or like, okay, fine, we'll just, like they're not having a spaz or a temper tantrum about it. Yeah. They're like, okay, Brad, I don't agree. I see your point, and I'm willing to work with it, and I can proceed with you. So it's so we can take the nuances of the word, but the energy is critical, that they are actually heartfelt committed to what the decision is.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And I only stress it because I'd hate for someone to listen to this and say, oh, well, so we're going to agree to disagree. It means the same thing. It's the commit. And I know that you and I've spoken about this before. It's the commit that matters. It's, okay, we are going to aim for 100 widgets or whatever it is. This is where we're going to get to. And that's what makes the real difference. So how have you seen this playing out in teams? So, like, I've used it and I've found it really powerful. Have you got any examples or anything that comes to mind?
It's nonstop. I mean, I just spent last week 2 days with a company and all we do is debate. And it's interesting. And we were using some new technology. So one of my team members was there helping with getting it working. And he goes, wow, those debates are crazy. And like, we would go and we would debate from 8 a.m. till 8 or 10 at night sometimes on the first day of the 2-day, because they have what I call a debate deficit. They have this huge buildup of debates that haven't happened. And so they can't do anything constructive. So every time we have a meeting, we deal with a bunch of these debates and get them back on the same page in the line. But one of the things I watch is you just watch the childish behavior.
Yeah.
And you'll see people that are like, or they will be like not able to move on. And you'll say, okay, so can we agree that we're going to do this and move ahead? And you go around the room and they're like, but yeah, but, you know? And so the hardest thing that I have found on my is getting all the facts and feelings on the table that need to be said. And that's usually where, and we have a lot of things we do. And I know you do too, but we really try to flush out the inner guts of the issue up front.
Yeah.
And then you have to have sometimes a lot of time. Like you end up with what you described of, yeah, fine, we'll do it your way kind of commitment. And then it fades in the future because you actually haven't spent enough time debating. So if we had we had about 12 debates in that 2-day meeting, but there's one that went about an hour and a half. And I kept trying to land the plane on a decision. and I tried to land it 5 times.
Yeah.
And to just go from a theoretical discussion down to gridded action items in this grid that we designed for this. We use a lot of grids or tools for the debates. And I couldn't even get them down to tangibility. It's 5 times, unless I smashed them over the head with a virtual hammer, which I wasn't going to do. But literally, it's like they had to be heard. They had to get it out. And there's an art to facilitating this. If you go too fast, it doesn't work. If you go too slow, you lose the meeting. So anyway,
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So without speaking out of school, like either in that example or another example, what's the difference between the role in the facilitator or the advisor as you're playing and the CEO? Because the CEO, in my experience, is often they're right in the middle of it. They've got their opinion and they want to make sure they're heard. They've got their opinion. They've got their own emotions that are playing. It's like going into a boxing ring without an umpire.
It is, and the challenge is the smartest CEOs have learned. The really, really effective ones, they keep their mouth shut.
Yeah.
And they might speak for 17 to 34 seconds in an entire debate.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of my clients have us facilitate those, and our team and you as well. Because if they're in the middle of it, they can't see clearly. And when we are facilitating it, they can keep their mouth shut. And sometimes they need some coaching on that. Sometimes I need coaching on that, just to be fair. Sometimes I get too impassioned. But they just sit there and listen it out and watch. And then they might ask a question, or usually they just let it work out. So their role is sometimes as a participant, but often as an observer. And our roles are to make sure that we, manage traffic. Because as you know, people start talking on top of each other and the conversation goes into the ditch. Like I know for me, like I get very, very strong in those on keeping the debate clear. Yeah. Sometimes it goes way down into the weeds. You got to pull it back up. Sometimes it's way off in theoretical land. You got to pull it back to reality. Sometimes they get lost in this topic. I go, whoa. Can we finish this first? I'll make a note. Let's come back to we're trying to figure out what color the wall is going to be. Yeah. But so it's like you're herding cats.
Yeah.
And we have lots of techniques, but like it's fun. I love it.
Yeah. So
I it's very challenging. I'll share with you one technique for other people. One of the best techniques is, so there will be the topic, but what is the outcome we want from this discussion? Is it a decision? Is it an agreement on a principle? Is it an agreed next step? Like, what is the actual outcome? And usually 3, 4, 5, 6 times in a debate, I'll have to go back and restate the question. Okay, so where are we? Because they anyways, you understand this, Brad. So I'd like to hear. What's an example? Of what are some of the things that you have found help? And I would say time is most important. Time and someone to manage time.
Yeah.
But what are the things you have found that really make these really productive? And then maybe later we could talk about the other side of the coin that doesn't work so well.
Well, what's the objective of a strategic offsite? Taking the team offsite is to have confidence in the strategy and the plan and where we're going. All of that is underpinned by the conversations that occur. And I think that the CEO is used to running these meetings, or at least dominating these meetings or being involved. So I kind of use the phrase, we're going to democratize the decision-making process.
Absolutely.
And you're going to be one of the 5, 6, 7, 8 leadership team members. And I want to hear from you in equal quantities, roughly, to everyone else. And that's because if the CEO is facilitating, they're not able to participate as well as facilitate. Because exactly what you said, you've got to think, hang on, we're going to talk about the color of the walls, not the fact that, we need to buy 6-inch screws or whatever it is. We've got to keep, there is a full-time engaged job to make the conversation end where it needs to end, where everyone is aligned. And then let's be fair, they're then going into 13 weeks of execution where the decisions that are made really, really matter. So all of that coming back, I think that disagree and commit is so important. It's foundational. It really is. That's why it's like the first slide in every workshop I do. It's got to be something that it's like a part of the rules of going back to the boxing match. It's part of the rules. If you went into a boxing match and there was no umpire and there was no rules, you would have a bit of fear.
Chaos.
It'd be chaos.
Yeah, which takes us to another point that in most of the companies, we create rules for debate.
Yeah.
Like what are the rules we want to live by? And again, it's a debate to create the rules for the debate. Yeah. Like we don't impose them. Most, I love that democratizing the decision or democratizing the debate. And again, obviously we both have very similar approaches, different tools and techniques. But getting that sorted out, it's like we've agreed on how we're going to do it. And and in one of the companies I work with, they have some executives, which we can talk about in a second, who are not comfortable being fully honest in the room. Yeah. So they agree, but then they uncommit as soon as they leave. So we made a rule in the company. If you have a different feeling or a different thought, you bring it back to the entire group. Yeah. And you readdress it with everyone so we can clean it up. Don't go off and gossip in the corner or undermine it. And we're holding each other to that because it was getting messy because there's a degree of trust that's required to do that. Yeah. Which, by the way, as a facilitator, I make sure that we manage as well. Yeah. To make sure that it doesn't get ugly or inappropriate, because all you need is, one bad debate and everyone's like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. And I'm sure you've seen it. The other thing on it that I've learned over the years is that we flush out before the meeting starts what debates need to happen. Yeah. So in some companies, I will do one-on-one coaching sessions and interviews with the key members, or my team will. But we actually go and one-on-one flush out, because like, if the debate that you really need to have is that, Kevin is rude and disruptive and is driving customers crazy, you might not be willing to bring that up. That might be a career limiting move. Yeah. So you might choose to stay silent. But when we flush these things out in advance, we can find ways that they get onto the table. And because you've had time, so we either interview on brand new companies and some existing. Like in this company I was with for a couple of days last week, I spent half a day coaching each of the executives, which is helping them to learn and grow, and then making sure we flush out the key issues to talk as a team. Because in a lot of companies, we talk about the nice things. I learned from the great Jim Collins, what you got to talk about is the stuff you don't want to talk about. Yeah. You got to talk about the brutal facts. And so, yeah, we flush that out through interviews and through surveys, and we make a list up front, and to make sure that we're discussing the most important things. And by the way, if you're going to have a professional facilitator and coach and advisor in the room, you might as well get your money's worth and address the high value, high impact stuff, not the what color's the wall going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you touched on, we started with disagree and commit. You touched on brutal honesty. They're two of the rules. There's a third one, which is no shame, no blame. These three coming from Jim Collins' research. Disagree and commit, no shame, no blame, brutal honesty. That's the kind of magic formula that is tied together by a facilitator in the strategic planning process. When you can get that work, there's the safety in the room that we're going to make things work. It's a safe environment, and we all know the rules that we're playing by. It just works so well. And I mean, using those principles, I've found we've kind of gone 6 months or a year into an engagement with a team, and the team's saying, it's all the same bodies, but it feels like I'm on a completely different leadership team.
Of course. Because normally they can't get to that place. They don't have the safe space and someone to help keep the conversation safe, so they just don't bring it up.
Yeah.
And they talk about the color of the wall and the weathers and the beautiful new product. So why do you think people have trouble with this? I mean, why do you think this is so hard for a number of companies to get this healthy debate in their companies?
Yeah. It's good. It's, I don't think you were asking me a question then. I think that was rhetorical.
I am. I want to hear your opinion.
Ask it to me again.
You got great ideas, Brad. So why do you think for a lot of companies, it's so hard to create these healthy, robust debates that end up in a commitment or a disagree to commit? Disagree and commit, sorry.
Well, I think it's because it's a failure of leadership, to be honest. I think the rules aren't established and enforced. The rules of the game. Let's go back to the boxing ring. Clearly, it's metaphor, but in the boxing ring, the way in which we interact with and conduct ourselves and debate with other people, there isn't the referee and there isn't the rules that have severe penalties if you breach them. So in that environment, people tend to retract and they think, oh, I don't want to upset that person, or we can't talk about that subject. We know that's off limits. And I just don't play well in that environment at all. I'm like, hey, if it's there, we got to talk about it. The two of you, Robbie and Joe, if you two aren't talking, if you've got an issue, like, we got to sort this out. Like, are we professionals? Would you like to go and work somewhere else? If that's a yes and a no, then we can do this the easy way or the hard way. And my preference would certainly be to do it the easy way, which is, you know what, like, we're just going to have to make this work. So yeah, I think I think that without that set of rules there that govern the behaviors and that people trust, I think it's a problem. Yeah, I think that's where the problems lie. What do you think?
I agree that that's a foundational piece, and someone to consistently hold people to the rules. Because if the CEO is running the meeting, or even the CEO is in the meeting, it's very hard for other people to call the CEO on it. Yeah. Like that threatens job security. I mean, we do it in our work because by nature it is our job. And, you know, like you, I make sure I have a great relationship with the CEO so I can call them on it. Sometimes it's in the room and sometimes it's outside the room, and then they come back. And, you know, I had in a recent meeting, I had somebody who did something that was normal behavior for them, but seen as very inappropriate to the meeting. And so on a break, I contacted them and said, hey, you know, and he goes, I know, because I respectfully call different people on things all the time to help them stay. It doesn't always have to be done in public, but letting him know that behavior was not cool. He's like, I got it. My bad. Somebody else already said something to me. After the break, I'm going to come back to the team and I'm going to clean it up. And I said, what are you going to say? He told me to say it. I said, perfect. You're on it. This is exactly what is the right thing, because it's almost like he broke trust of the team and he needed to come back and now rebuild that trust. And so that, you know, in our roles, I do a lot of that. Yeah. Why at least sometimes I'm sending a text to someone or have a conversation just to help them stay in good stead with their teammates. And it seems like little things, but when you're the CEO and you're running the meeting, it's really hard to keep track of all this stuff. And it's a lot of little things.
Yeah. I'll tell you a quick story. I think that calling out, the elephant in the room, or calling out at any point as a facilitator, when you're seeing something and it's not being spoken about, like, it's so important. There was a situation I remember, a company I work with, and leadership team of about 6 or 7 people. And our philosophy is you should have no less than 3, no more than 5 priorities per person, 3 to 5 priorities.
Yep.
And also, is there anything that's carried over from the last quarter? So we didn't have the time to execute it, or we failed, or whatever. Some things get carried on to the next quarter. So we're getting through the meeting, and person 1 has 3, person 2 has 4, person 3 has 5, or whatever. And then we get to one person, he's got about 10 or 11 or 12 priorities, and no one was saying anything. And I'm saying all of the burden is falling onto this person because of their role. Like, based on what I can see, this person isn't executing, or they're not getting the support, or like there's some major structure problem here. And it was, the CEO was not really that happy that I did it. He said to me afterwards, but I said, if I don't do it, no one's going to do it. We had it.
Yep.
And I said, in fact, I think based on what I can see, like, this person is at a risk of leaving the organization. I wish I didn't have to say that, because the person did leave the organization because they weren't getting the support. And this was the CEO's chance to change something or do something. They didn't. It's not to say that I'm right, but it's to say that you've got to call out those brutal facts if you see it.
You do. And it's interesting, Brad, though, is like not every company is open to that.
Yeah.
I've had one CEO I like, and I really like the guy. He was a good guy. He didn't want that a part of his meetings.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't comfortable dealing with them.
Yeah.
Like, he's the kind of person that would rather leave, we call it in the West, leaving sleeping dogs lie. Now, there's a price to that. And heck, a lot of businesses do. We don't work with normal companies.
No.
We work with companies that want to be great and to continue to grow and scale and improve. And if you just want to keep your simple little business and have, enough cash flow to support your life and all that stuff, we shouldn't, not here to judge that. That's just not who I want to work with.
No.
I want with people that want to deal with it and do the tough stuff to have great companies. But in his case, I said to him something, you are completely wasting your money with me.
Yeah.
Because we're not having the tough conversations and we're not making the tough decisions. And that's okay. Then and I said, you'd be better off. And I will still talk to this guy. I really like him. You'd be better off with somebody else who's more willing to just to kind of go with the flow and do what you need, and probably not push as hard for greatness.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because it's not for everyone. Like, to build a great company is not for the faint of heart. You have to get very comfortable with very comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And a lot of tough debates.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that hard, because at the end of the day, if you create the structure, people generally want to work things out.
Yeah.
They want to find a way to make it work.
They do. I think that, I use a phrase, you can't unsee what you've seen. Once you've been in an organization where there's a leadership team where this dynamic is operating, these people, they either want to leave to go somewhere similar, or they don't want to leave, because they go back to the dysfunction that they see in regular businesses, and they're just devastated. They're like, the frustration is tenfold than it normally would be, because they know how good it can be.
They know it exactly. They know what great look. It's like if you've been to a great steakhouse. Like when I was down in Sydney a while ago, we actually went to dinner with a bunch of guys who were in the beef business.
Oh, yeah.
And they actually were in the business of some very, very, very high quality Wagyu, like direct from Japan type Wagyu. Anyways, we went to this amazing steakhouse that had an amazing steak. It's like, and at one time we were down in the US at a car race. You and I went to the race in Melbourne, actually just over a year ago.
Yeah.
But I was down in Texas with my son at the F1 race, and after a day of racing and everything, we went to get food on the way out, and we went for a steak at a place called Denny's. And Denny's is like a diner. And, it's like, it's, and the truth is, actually, the steak was decent. It was actually shockingly better than I expected. It was a $15 Denny's decent steak. But it just was like, once you know what this tastes like, and this Wagyu from one of the best restaurants in Sydney and blah, 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 it's like, what great looks like. And it's okay to go to and have an inexpensive steak in a diner type place. But you don't want to make those decisions with your careers usually. And that's why we find with the companies that we work with, when you create a healthy environment where the tough things get on the table and you work things out, and it has a strong culture, that's pretty hard for other people to compete with. Oh yeah, and they have autonomy and a voice in the debates.
Yeah.
That's not only is it great for the performance of the company, but it's great for retention and engagement, because that's what smart people want to be around.
It's the foundation. It's all of the great things that companies achieve. They come from that foundation. Without that, you can have a few surges here or there, but you're not going to build an enduring great company.
And with smart people, debate is a foundation. So I think we kind of wrap up what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Disagree and commit, and lock arms together and move ahead. Or you can go with Judy's, agree to disagree, but Brad might not agree with me on that. So we can agree to disagree. Or you would say we can disagree and commit, but whatever. It's that getting the lasting alignment is really kind of what we're after.
Yeah, it's coming out of a workshop planning session with an aligned team. You know where you're going and what you've got to do. All right. So unless there's any other closing comments, I'll move to close, Kevin. Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast. I'm Brad Giles, and this is Kevin Lawrence. You can find me at evolutionpartners.com.au and Kevin at lawrenceandco.com. So thanks very much for everyone for watching. It's been a pleasure.
See ya.